Today we're going to be looking at 10 different players and how their values are changing in fantasy football drafts due to what's going on preseason training camp and the recent news. Before we dig in though, you need to click that subscribe button right now. We're talking about these players every day. We're talking about how their values are changing, where they should be drafted, how to strategize for your drafts in season. We're talking about the waiver wire every single day, and we're helping you set your lineups every single day. Click that button, stop missing out. But we're going to start off with Jahan Dotson. Big news today. He's being traded to the Eagles. Now he's going to be competing for targets with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. And he's got a late start in the preseason, the training camp with them. Odds are he's not going to be fantasy relevant. He's a slot receiver, probably just going to be a guy in fantasy football. We got some openings here in Washington. Terry McLaurin should be soaking up targets. A lot of people are speculating that the Commanders are going to bring in Brandon Ayuk, that they got more capital to do it with the draft picks that came back in compensation. We got to see what's going to happen there. Dyami Brown's another dark horse there, and there's a lot of other wide receivers on this depth chart that's climbing up for targets. Gotta pay attention to the Washington Commanders. Let me know in the comments below who you're shooting for. But Jahan Dotson going to the Eagles. Fantasy football prowess pretty much kills it here for 2024. Bo Nix is the starter for the Broncos. We all know this. But now he's viable in a lot of leagues, especially in Superflex and 2 QB leagues. 1 QB leagues, it really depends on how you strategize around the quarterback position. He's a backup quarterback right now in fantasy football, but a lot of people don't draft backup quarterbacks. I don't draft backup quarterbacks. If I'm drafting a top 10 quarterback, 9 times out of 10, pretty much 10 out of 10 times, I'm not drafting another quarterback. If I'm drafting a quarterback in double-digit rounds, I'm playing the matchups. Bo Nix is a guy you're playing the matchups with until further notice. And if he starts popping off, if he starts getting a lot of pass attempts, if he's very efficient, if he's good in fantasy, pick him up off waivers if he's still available. Kendre Miller is losing steam, losing value. A few months ago, he was being drafted around round 10. Now he's falling to almost undrafted territory, and they do not like that he's been injured, he's been hurt, he hasn't been on the field, they don't know what they have in him, they're not confident that if he's out there, he can run the playbook. Will he make the 53? That is the big question with Kendre Miller. Is that going to happen? We have to pay attention to his scene and his story. If he's on the Saints, still a dart throw off the waiver wire. You're not drafting him in regular fantasy leagues. In Dynasty, I know a lot of people are trying to catch him on the cheap. I don't see that really happening. I think people are holding tight. Maybe some people will sell for a song, but again, once the value just plummets, you're going to hold usually until you figure it out. But a lot of people will dish him out too for a few pennies coming back. Kendre Miller, though, is a player to pay attention to over the next few days and weeks. Jonnu Smith. And the one thing I want to point out is this Dolphins team in preseason has been moving around the tight ends a lot pre-snap. I don't know what that's going to mean for fantasy, but he's new with the Dolphins. With Atlanta last year, still averaged 4 targets per game in an Arthur Smith offense. This is a very fast-paced offense. He's going in double-digit rounds. This is a player you need to pay attention to. I do not know what that means for fantasy football, but we're seeing a lot of movement pre-snap from the tight ends. They're getting involved. This could mean more targets than expected, maybe a lot of short targets underneath, but he's got the size and just athleticism to get you yards after the catch. McDaniel has mentioned that in press conferences. I got to pay attention to Malik Neighbors. Very interesting prospect here going in the second round of drafts. There's a lot of upside to be had with Neighbors. I like Neighbors, especially for Dynasty Redraft Rise. Can you get that top tier return on investment out of him? That is the question. We saw him get locked up with Sauce Gardner yesterday. Is that going to be an issue? However, when we get to the second round, and maybe this is more of a story of the second round, we look at these wide receivers, and I can give you a red flag on all of them. The red flag on Neighbors is a rookie. We need him to get tested a little bit more. He also has Daniel Jones there, just slinging rocks at the wrong places. Malik Neighbors, though, talent for days. Justin Jefferson, Ja'Marr Chase type of talent. Let's see if we can capitalize it. I think round 2 is a lot high. You got to look at that. He was going in round 3 earlier. He's a round 2 guy right now. Maybe it drops a little bit. I don't think that's happening. Are you willing to pay that right now? Zamir White might be sharing touches with Alexander Mattison. But they came back in a press conference and saying, hey, we're going to run the ball so much, it's not going to matter, and we got to use 2 running backs. Pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. All we know is Zamir White could still have an elite opportunity share, and this is just fuzzy-duzzy throughout the preseason. However, Zamir White sharing the workload with Alexander Mattison in preseason, something to pay attention to. He's cheap nonetheless. He's very cheap. He's the back end of those RB2s going in the middle of the draft. So just pay attention. The price tag is not steep, and the price tag warrants the risk anyways. So I'm still going to be drafting him at cost. Austin Eckler went over some clips over Jaden Daniels. He's catching balls out of the backfield. Might get more targets than expected. Looks like he has some pop in the step, but it's still just clips. Something to pay attention to, but you're drafting him at RB40 range, double-digit rounds. If he reverts back to the old Austin Eckler, maybe even 95% of that, and he's getting pumped targets, you may want that on your fantasy team. Kamani Vital, we covered this prior a few days ago, but I just want to hammer this home. It was a mistake by a beat writer. He wasn't getting touches. He wasn't getting looks in training camp because he was out with an injury or something. He had some off days. He wasn't on the field. That beat writer kept him off the 53 because he did not have the proper evaluation on him, but that beat writer did not drop any context. Beat writer came back later last week, early this week, later last week if I remember right, that Vital is going to make the 53. Looks good in preseason. Honestly, whenever I see him, he's looking good. He's good between the tackles. He's decisive. Redraft-wise, late round dart throw, if that, you're probably picking him up off waivers later. Marvin Mims is dying on this roster. He's falling down the depth charts. He's probably not going to get enough opportunity to be fantasy relevant. Has a good metric profile coming out of college. Has some upside with the 4.3 speed. But Marvin Mims is probably not going to get enough playing time to really hash things out for your fantasy team. Tim Patrick stepping up. If you're looking for a dart throw out of these Broncos, Tim Patrick would be your guy. George Pickens, round 4 draft capital. Brandon Ayuk has not made it to Pittsburgh yet, if at all, if that will ever happen. The thing is, we're getting better targets. I won't say accurate. Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, both those quarterbacks haven't been looking great in preseason. But he's going to get targeted. He's going to get a lot of targets in this offense. And it might amount to 6, 7, 8 targets a game. It might be a little bit spiky. But I expect a little bit better from George Pickens. I expect 100 air yards a game. I expect 6 to 10 targets. Probably around 6 to 8. Probably around 6 to 8. I think 5's the low game. And if for some reason he gets less than 5, something happened. And I get it's an Arthur Smith offense. But the way things look from training camp, things are going to get funneled his way. A.D. Mitchell, if you're looking for a dart throw with a lot of upside and double-digit rounds at wide receiver, this is your guy. 4.3 speed, paired with a quarterback that just launches it downfield. Could be your guy, and if not, return him to the waiver wire and just keep pulling them strings. But if you want a lottery ticket compared to the other rookie lottery tickets at wide receiver, this is a guy to pull a ticket at and see what happens. Josh Palmer is going to get some opportunities this year, falling down draft boards, double-digit rounds, being forgotten about a little bit. But if you're looking for a cheap, steady Eddie wide receiver, he could be a guy for you. But those are some players that we're looking at right now that has some news headed their way that impacts their fantasy stock. Some of it's bad news, and they're dying right now. Some of it's good news, and they're going up the board. Some of it, we're just looking at their situation, saying, hey, check this guy out. Don't forget about him. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. Thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video.